Hello, hello, hello. TM24 here, and we are back for some more Marvel Snap content. Now today, I've got one of my favorite style of decks in Control, but of course, we've got to use Galactus. I will say though, Jean Grey makes Galactus almost too easy. So if you've been watching any of my videos, you know how this is going to go. I'm going to show you some gameplay. Then I'll talk a little bit about the deck and the play lines and your win conditions here. And then I'll give you some potential replacement cards in case you don't have some of the cards here. But let's get into some gameplay and we'll be right back to discuss the deck in a minute. Alright, so let's get right into this gameplay with this Galactus Control deck, kind of featuring Jean Grey. The idea here, get Jean Grey down on 3 or 4, something like that. Typically a lane that your opponent has not filled. That's going to force them to play there. If you then play Wave on 5 into that Jean Grey lane, make sure it's filled, that leaves you free to Galactus, either the other 2 locations, and chances are you're going to end up winning that location. So that's the Galactus play line, but that's not the only line of play that you've got here. You can see we've got Professor X, we've got Spider-Man, so we have some lockout mechanics. Additionally, we've got cards like Armor, who acts as a really nice protector, one, but also as a counter for these destroy decks. We're making it really tough on our opponent in this game right here, because now Bucky and a Rock, they can't do a whole lot in that lane. So chances are we've won that lane. And if you look at our hand going into 5, we already have Spider-Man ready to go as well. So you don't necessarily have to hit Galactus with this deck, but it's a great option if your opponent hasn't been getting much down. So as you can see here, we've got Sunspot down, we've got Nebula down, Jeff, Armor, and we've got Spider-Man ready to go. So the plan here, of course, is actually Professor X into the Rickety Bridge. And the reason we want to do that is we want to stop whatever Shuri's got going on. Being a destroy deck, we're of course expecting Nimrod, which would be really, really bad for us. So again, we have another counter here. Not only can we stop a destroy deck through Armor, we can stop it through Professor X as well. And although they don't make the most optimal play line here, we are still in a really nice spot going into turn 6. So you'll see here, as soon as they figure out which card they're going to play, which, hey, I already know what's coming down. It's going to be a Deathlock, but it's not going to be a big deal. Yes, we only have 1 power in the form of Nebula on, Kunlun, if I'm saying that right, but we can still add more power. So as you can see, we stopped the Deathlock Shuri play. We thought it was going to be Nimrod, so we didn't get quite the value we wanted there, but we also know that they're probably not going to the Eternity range, so that leaves us free to go ahead and toss Jeff over into the far right lane. Also going to get a +2 for moving. Additionally, if we are a little bit closer in Rickety Bridge, you could also put Jeff into that lane to win that as well. So I really like the flexibility that Jeff gives you with this deck, reaching those lanes that are already cut off, already Professor X, and allowing you to get more power into a lane that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So you can see here, we're actually adding 14 power to this lane, and they've got to make up 12. Definitely possible with Null, with Death, but they haven't been able to destroy a whole lot. Bucky and the Rock, they're still sitting there. Deathlock and Shuri, neither of them were destroyed. They were probably hoping that Deathlock would get destroyed so that they could play a nice big Null on 6, but again, we stopped that. So what is their only option? Wolverine into Carnage on turn 6. Feels bad. Wolverine hits where it needs to, but we've got far too much power for them, and we end up winning the game. So a really nice play there where we weren't able to pull off Galactus, but we were able to stop our opponent and kind of control the way the game was going to go. Now this game is going to be a little bit different. You can see we've got Daredevil, we've got Galactus, Destroyer, Professor X already in our hand. So it's time to get Daredevil down, and since we picked up Jean Grey, we already have a plan in place. If we can pick up Wave, we're in a really good spot to execute that plan. Mirror Island is nice for us, and the reason that is because it's going to force our opponent, well, not force, our opponent is going to want to play cards there to get the buff. They play Thor, which is a really nice card, but again, it's going to be tough to get the most value out of Thor. We're going to continue to fill that Onslaught Citadel and really get ahead there. We want to set ourselves up for a Wave on 5. Now, we haven't drawn it yet, and that's a little bit tough, but it's not the end of the world yet. They play Jubilee, which pulls Mjolnir. Actually, that's kind of good for us because right now the Citadel is ours. But as you can see, we drew the perfect card on 5. We've got Wave ready to go. They have not filled the Citadel yet, and because of Daredevil, we can see what they're playing. They're going with a Jane, which is fine because they still have 1 slot open in Citadel. So you see the plan in motion right here. We're going to go ahead and Wave. They're only playing 1 card on 6, and they've got to play on that Jean Grey lane. So that means we're free to Galactus, and Jotunheim is going to be the target. Galactus is going to come down. They are way ahead in Muir Island. They probably think they've got a pretty good shot at this game, but really they are nowhere close. Hulk comes down, really nice play. Now we see that it's a high evolutionary, probably Lockjaw style deck, but we come through with the Galactus, delete everything else, and get another nice victory. That is the ideal playline when you're gonna go with Galactus. So it feels really, really nice to pull that one off. We're into our 3rd and final game. And this was probably my favorite game because it really made me think. I had to figure out how I was going to win this game. And that's what I like about my decks. I don't want it straightforward. I don't want it easy. I want to be able to figure it out because if I have to figure it out, it means my opponent doesn't have a clue on what I'm doing since I don't until the last couple turns. So we've got Sunspot down. Sunspot's ready to go. We don't pick up a 2-drop or Nebula. So right now we're kind of chilling until turn 3. You see, we've got Jean Grey. We have Wave. No sign of Galactus yet. So we've got to figure out our game plan. Do we go Jean Grey? Do we go Wave? Ultimately, we decide to go Jean Grey. Now, something else that I could point out here, we have Wave in this deck as well, which means we have the option to go Wave into Galactus into Spider-Man. Another really, really nice combo that is really tough for our opponents to come back from. Now, we did end up picking up Galactus, and we're going to play Wave. That's going to allow us to set that play up. Well, at least set up a Galactus on 5. Now, that might not be the route we end up going, but we're going to play Wave and see what we want to do. They play High Evo, so we know we're in a really, really nice spot. We're ahead 3 in the flooded location, and we've got some, we've got options here. We could go with a Professor X. We could go with a Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is the card that we are looking to play here. So we're going to play Spider-Man into Hellfire because that lane is not contested at all right now. We know we're going to get a +1 on Sunspot, so that's going to put us up 4. Now, 4 is a very crucial breakpoint number because of Dr. Doom. The nerf to Doom means that we've got to get over 4 in these locations. We're at 4 in Hellfire Club. We're at 4 in Flooded. We just need to make sure we've got enough in those other 2 locations. And with our hand, there's 2 options, but there's one that makes us a little bit more secure in that flooded lane. So Daredevil comes down. They do play that Dr. Doom. Sunspot goes up. We win by 4. We win by 2. We win the game again. This is a great deck. All right, so you've seen some gameplay. Let's talk about this deck. Now, I love Control, so I wanted to fit Galactus into this deck somehow, and Jean Grey was the perfect answer, right? We've got great 1-drops, Sunspot and Nebula. We've got great lockout mechanics in Professor X and Spider-Man, and Daredevil definitely helps us there. But we've got 2 major lines of play that can really help us lock down these games. So let's talk about them here. I'm going to put up this graphic here, and you see, you want to get Jean Grey down on 3. 4 is okay, but what you want to do is get her on a lane that already has at least 1 card. So ideally, Sunspot, Nebula, or Daredevil, something like that, right? And ideally, it's a lane that your opponent doesn't have any cards in. And the reason you want to do this, because if you go Jean Grey on 4, on 5, you go Jeff and Wave. Chances are your opponent has not filled that lane already, so they're only playing 1 card on 6. And that means you're free to Galactus pretty much whatever lane, being one of the other 2, to win you the game. So that right there is one of your win conditions, right? Force them to play onto the Jean Grey lane with Wave. On 6, you Galactus whatever you want. Now, the other way that you can win with this deck, of course, is through Daredevil, Professor X, or Spider-Man, right? So you Daredevil early. On 5, you know which lane you're locking out. Either with Professor X or Spider-Man, you're going to win that lane. And then you can simply follow that up with the Chavez, or if you're able to protect your cards with something like Professor X, Destroyer is a great option as well. But this deck is tons of fun. Your 2 win conditions, Galactus, and then using, one of our lockout mechanics, but it's not the only way that you can win, and this isn't the only way you can play this deck. So let's talk about some of the other inclusions here. First up, we've got a 2-drop that definitely doesn't see a whole lot of play, but certainly makes sense in this deck, and that's Colossus, right? You can play Colossus on some of those lanes that are a little bit tougher, that give you negative power, not going to be destroyed by Galactus, or not Galactus, not going to be destroyed by Destroyer, so you can pile the Destroyer right onto that, that Colossus lane, and you're feeling pretty good. Now, we don't have any 4-drops, so I've got 3 of them that I think would fit really nicely in this deck. 1, I always like having some sort of answer. So for me, that's Shang-Chi. Any big threat, Shang-Chi come down, deleting it feels great. Now, the other 2 are a little bit different. We've got Atuma. Atuma's great. You get Atuma down on 4, you can Professor X that lane on 5. If you've got armor down, Atuma coming down on that lane feels pretty good. And now let's talk about Sentry. Sentry is going to put that -10 void. That's going to lull your opponent into a false sense of security that they're probably going to win that lane. So if you could follow up with a Destroyer on that lane, you delete that void, put Destroyer there, that's a 25 power swing that your opponent just isn't going to be ready for. They're already going to think they've won it, but Destroyer's going to come down and steal that lane for you. So that's why Sentry makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I do have 2 other cards that I think would be pretty good fits as well. I know Jeff is a little bit tough because a lot of people don't have him. A really nice replacement is Nightcrawler. He allows you to reach those lanes that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, and with this deck, you really don't have any other way to get into those lanes. So I feel like having 1 card that can move around is kind of crucial. Now, when you do that, and if it's a lane that you can't reach, obviously you can't play Destroyer, otherwise you're going to destroy that card. So just something to be aware of there. And then the other card that you could potentially play is actually Orca. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Orca, but it's actually more power than Destroyer if you're playing it into a single lane. Additionally, if you don't have Galactus, but you have Orca, you could still run the Jean Grey line of Jean Grey on 4, and then following up with the Wave, Jeff, or something like that to fill that Jean Grey lane on 5, and that kind of leaves you to play an Orca onto whatever lane you're going to win it with. So those are some replacement cards. Those are your win conditions and your typical lines of play, but I'd love to know what you guys think. I love Control, so anytime I can put together a fun Control deck that actually wins, and in this case has Galactus included, I'm super happy. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll give whatever suggestions you guys got a try as well. Now, if you've hung around till now and watched the whole video, I really do appreciate you. It means a lot to me. And if you haven't subscribed or liked the video yet, now would be a good time to do so. I'm trying to put out Marvel Snap content on the daily, so you want to make sure that you don't ever miss a video. But until the next one, have some fun.